All right. Well, this looks like a pretty good crowd to me. Should we get started? Is anyone opposed? All right, cool. Derek, you're starting because I'm most interested in what you did.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I did I pretty much ran a little tool that used that redirect list. Well, I did the make link check run that created an output log, and then used a little tool that said, okay, look through everything in the docs folder for the links that are being redirected, and then see if you could replace them. But there's a few things that have followed up that I need to go through because I didn't realize that there was a man page that's included in there that's auto-generated by different tools outside of
Oh, okay.
here. So my tool went through like an auto-generated file and started replacing things, and that's unnecessary. And there's some other things like redirects that are necessary, like the Jinja links. There's like 2 or 3 redirects that happen with those, and they were going eventually to the 2.11.x version endpoints when really I could just be having it go straight to the site to that particular Jinja, like Jinja 2 environment, for example. If you removed en 2.11.x, it'll just go to the latest version. So it's kind of like a necessary redirect so that it will always go to the latest.
Right. Yeah.
And there were some other ones that they were redirects because there were like brand changes that I didn't involve in this PR and other things I'm going to have to make separate issues related to, because some products have even changed their name.
Right.
And so the documentation's out of date in a different way, because not just because the link's different, but because even the product's different. I don't know if that will affect the code modules, because that means some of the code modules are referencing a product that's called something else now. And
right.
Yeah, so
was there an issue ever written up for this?
Just in the Docs Hub.
We kind of had one in Salt that talked a little bit about this, but I don't know that it was this specific.
Okay, gotcha.
And I think
either way, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's kind of, and it seems almost like it could just be. It's almost like it could be every now and then. I mean, the best approach is if I can make a tool that'll go through and make a bunch of changes, but then I still would have to then go through afterward just to like verify, hey, were some of these redirects even going to something that's the right endpoint, that kind of thing. But it was nice. Right. After scripting it out, it was like a lot less time. It was just a tedious then going through the results to ensure, does this make sense? I mean, the biggest ones were HTTP was always converted to HTTPS. Those were a lot of redirects. And then same with the PyPy, since that changed to pypy.org.
Okay. And have you like compared that to this giant list here and seen how much of that was taken up by your stuff, or?
I think that one thing I'm not sure about is if I try to do a diff, for example, a lot of the ones that I do correct manually that were like different than their redirect endpoints, will still then say, oh, this is redirecting to something, but it's like a legitimate, like it should be redirecting in the way that it is.
Oh, okay.
And I also don't know if how much of that is that make link check only to the docs directory, or is it also going as part of the build, like in the comment, like the API documentation? Like I think there are links even within like Python files referencing source links that are also outdated, that I was thinking I could probably do in another wave, is to, I don't know.
I don't actually know how to pronounce your name. Imran? Imran?
Yeah, Imran. Yeah.
Right. You're the one that originally posted this. Can you answer that question for him?
What I understand, I didn't dig into it too deeply. If I can pull up the issue myself I started, I'll be able to see from there, from the output. But what I was going to say is, I think there was one message I gave to you on that. Can you go back to it on your side? Can you go back to the original issue that I set up?
Yeah, one moment. I think
number 15 or something. Yeah, that's the one. You just go down a little bit. we'll be able to see whether they're pulling in from the actual modules. Just a bit further.
All the way to the redirects?
Anywhere really, I'm just scanning through this as you're doing it, because we should start seeing if they're coming in from the modules. I believe they are. Wayne, can you see anything?
From the actual Python files themselves, you mean?
I think it is, yeah. I think it's actually going into the Python files and finding issues with the URLs there as well.
It should be, as
'Cause I
far
think
as
what it
I'm
does,
aware.
it builds the actual docs and it looks in the
Yeah.
rendered output for it. So yeah, I think you got it here. So yeah, ref modules, all salt modules. So it's going into the modules to find that. But I think further down in this issue, right at the bottom, I think I mentioned ways to whitelist or blacklist your output. Can you go right to the bottom? Yeah, over here somewhere. Bit further down, bit further down. Here you go. Here. So link checks, anchors, ignore.
Yes, I actually I have that for bringing up link check ignore. Yeah.
Yeah. So there are various ways you can pass the output to make sure it doesn't show you certain domains or just whichever ones you want to
Oh,
add to the
awesome.
blacklist or whitelist.
Awesome.
So that should
Yeah.
save you a lot of trouble.
Yeah,
A good chunk of the, so if anyone's not tracking, I went through not the redirects, which is what Derek took on, but I went through all of the failed links and I put all the ones down here that like they were example URLs. Or something.
And there are a few more there. Can you see those timeouts and the retries? We spoke about that as well. And we said
Yeah.
those are, because sometimes, as Alan found out, the links were actually working, but they were just taking a time to resolve. So you do need to maybe configure those values as well.
Right. And but for all the ones that are examples, we could for now just add those all in here.
Sure.
Like they could just go all into this list because they're example URLs. They're never supposed to change. There's also another subset that they fail, and that's because like the hyperlink is actually good if you're running the service it's talking about. And again, those could probably also go to this ignore checklist because it's a good hyperlink. It's just you're not running the service.
Several too were they were proper landing pages, but they're behind a login wall. So the redirect was going to a login page. And so I kind of left a bunch of those alone too.
Right. I don't actually know this if this is universal, but if you are going to a page that's behind a login, if you log in, it will still take you to that page, correct?
Yeah. Like that's how it should be. But those are ones that are instances where I can't quite verify since I wouldn't have accounts to like log in and go, is this still an existing page on the other side?
Right. That might be either where, I don't know how much of a hassle it is, but that might be something where we actually contact that person, that website, and ask them like, hey, can you confirm or deny these kind of dependencies? I don't know, I feel like it's a lot of work though.
Are those internal, Derek, like the stuff that is sitting behind Zendesk?
No, there were some that weren't, that were just like other websites that were just related to like vendor products or something. And so,
or like they're like, go to AWS and start this, and AWS is like, you need an account. You know?
Oh, and there were a lot of instances too where it was like a link to something that then was redirected to a mirror. And so I was like, okay, I don't want to change that then, because then that would be dynamic based on the user.
I don't know how hacky this is, but if for both the redirects to logins and redirects to mirrors, that's somehow being mentioned in the URL for the redirect. Do you think it's possible for us to just go ahead and parse that out and say like, if contains login or if contains mirror in URL, ignore, it's fine.
Yeah, that's what I was doing in my like little script for skipping things. Like it was going, hey, if the redirect endpoint is like in this format, just I don't care about this kind of stuff to be.
That's great.
Yeah,
that's great. That's awesome. Cool. Well, that was exciting. I'm pretty happy to hear that like that chunk got done, man. Good job. Now
in progress on that PR at least still.
Yeah. I mean, like, you know, you started on it, right? It's in, and now we can all argue over all the tidbits.
Thank you so much for doing that, Derek.
And then for Alyssa, you had Salt Style Guide as your issue, but this is a long-term thing. How's that going?
The most I've done on that so far is just that I know where the existing one is. So let me pull that up really fast. Let me get that link.
Do you
Um,
want to share screen, or is it not that you don't really need to show anything?
I can show what exists. Yes. Is my screen visible right now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so this is just, so here is the URL. I can drop this into the chat when I'm done sharing, but this is the style guide that exists so far. And it might be good, probably the next step, I haven't really read through this yet, probably the next step will be to read through this and see if we like it, and then open up a PR to make any changes that we want to make to the style guide.
Okay.
So I can take that task on in this next sprint.
Cool. All right. Let me see who else had an issue that they agreed to do just too much labor for. That was a joke. Haha. No. Okay.
I laughed, but I was muted.
All right. I was voluntold by Alyssa to do docs clarification for Pillar Ops. I went ahead and put in a pull request for that change. And then it looks like Wayne had one for the test suite documentation, lacking details. How's that going? He's like, I like being muted. I don't have to talk.
Yeah, I know, right? And then Zoom goes, hides from me. I have not improved test suite documentation. One of the things that I was able to do is get the that one PR merged, or shepherd to get merged, the one that requires ensures that the doc that modules are present in docs. So that's super good, because that's been on my list for a very long time to get that guy merged in.
Well, we kind of started talking about testing documentation, and it got a little hairier because we're also putting in
Shifting
PyTests.
things, yeah.
And things are kind of shifting. And so that's going to be a major rehaul. And so this is probably the ticket that I was talking about, Wayne, the other day when I was like, isn't there a ticket for this? And now I'm like, oh, it's in the docs
This
hub.
is the one.
This is the one.
Yeah.
So, so many repos. And so I think that it's probably giant, and we'll probably just need to iterate on it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because there's some things that we're also trying to put in that's not only about like unit testing and you know what exactly it is, how you can write a unit test, but also larger, you know, much broader. So we may want to start picking that apart to see if we can iterate on it a little more.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there are definitely some things that we can do here. Yeah, I guess Tyler is assigned to the
PR.
Well, it's not a PR. There's an issue.
An issue. Yeah.
On the salt repo that's linked from the. Let me stick this in chat here.
There's a lot of issues.
I got it.
Yes.
Like 1,400 issues. So which one? That's just in salt. Let's go back to the other repos, the other 200 plus.
Yeah. So this issue here links to the one in salt.
Okay. Gotcha. Let me go look at that. There's so Tyler tends to not take himself off of things after he triages stuff. So I've stopped assigning him in that way. I'm like, oh, my mistake here. Let me stop doing that.
Yeah.
So that may be left over.
But this must have been one of the triggers for your stabbing Stalebot.
Probably. By the way, does everybody here know that Stalebot died a good death last week, and we will celebrate with cake and t-shirts later?
I mean, I celebrated whiskey the day I heard it was happening, so. I'm sorry.
I like the way you celebrate. We're friends.
All right,
I
cool.
celebrated that way too.
So, all right, so I'm going to take on a new issue. And then it sounds like Wayne, you still have yours. Alyssa, you still have yours. And for the open PRs, unless you have to take direct action, you should just assume those are done until someone says otherwise. And then if in the next following iterations you have 2 or 3 PRs that all of a sudden you have work to do, then obviously don't take on a new one. So Derek, it sounds like you still have stuff going on too. I'm probably the only one that's all good and I can take on a new one. Is anyone else here like to take on an issue? Is anyone volunteer to do homework?
I actually might.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
wanna-
mine took me like 10 minutes to do.
Right.
Yeah.
So I've been told to focus and that I shouldn't be doing this, but I really want to, so I do. And so I do it on the side and don't tell anybody. But I may. Something that I wanted to bring up with this group, and we may have something that aligns with this already in the backlog for the Docs Hub, but I wanted to bring it up with you guys specifically because this group I think would be involved, and I want this group's involvement because you guys are actually fairly key to this. We've been, Cassandra has undertaken a huge initiative to write a communications plan for open and for the community. And that is very large and is gonna take some serious time, and she's making great progress. In our last meeting, we did talk a lot about roadmaps and communicating out some timelines. And right now, I really want to over communicate that, but the suggestion was made to put that in the contributing guidelines and to put those in the docs, some of those communications. And it didn't occur to me until it was said that we're not hitting all those places where people go to look for that stuff. And so I'm really glad that people brought it up because I would like you guys' opinions for more places where we're probably not hitting that communication and where we should have that sort of posted, sort of general communication about like releases or updates or deprecations or new tools, new testing methods. I mean, you name it. I think that you guys may have more visibility of what where people are going. And so I just wanted to post that to this group.
Okay. Cassandra, do you want to say anything on this?
Yeah, so I've noticed our main channels are Slack and our IRC. Seem to be the main sources of information. I'm working with marketing on getting updates to the community.saltstack.com website. And the goal is for that to be a central landing place. So like the release timeline will go up there in a blog post and it'll live there, and then we can link people to that from elsewhere. But Slack and IRC are kind of the 2 main communication channels. We do have some people in the Google group, so that's another place that we'll be using. I think targeting those 3 places is a good place to start.
There's also, maybe it's strictly marketing, but emails as well. Some people prescribe to email lists.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's the SALT users and the SALT amounts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like the SALT stack
Grab that as
emails
well.
well, there's those emails marketing sends out as well that we get that are talking about upcoming events and things.
Yeah.
Do you all remember that one guy who was really cool, who compiled a big, huge set
Max
of release
Arnold?
notes? Yeah, like
Max?
Yeah.
Yeah.
his Salt tips. He's
Yeah,
got a
that
Salt Tips guy.
mailing
Yeah.
list.
Yeah,
I wonder
Max
if
Arnold.
it would be really awesome to connect with that guy and just talk to him more. And
Yeah, so
Um,
he's in Europe, I believe. I'm not exactly sure where, so his time is a little off from ours. But he is responsive. In fact, I DM him on community Slack a lot because
Yeah.
he's very, very active.
Yeah. Same here.
And I think that's he's a great resource. He's amazing and love working with him. And that's a great idea. As we've just talked about this, I was just thinking on the docs pages, I actually would not put this as sort of a buried link on a contributing page, but I would put it as sort of like a banner or a link in a banner, somewhere where you would see it on every page that you were in the documentation, so that then wherever you were going, it would be visible to you, but it wouldn't be buried in one page. And that's just me. And it's just an idea, but I'm open to other ideas because I think that I always think it's interesting when people start making suggestions, because then I'm like, I never thought of that. That's a great idea. Let's think about that more. It's like, I wanted to bring it up with you guys too.
All right, can we either make an issue, this doesn't sound like a SALT technical issue, so can we make an issue in Docs Hub with a summary there? Because I'm
Absolutely.
definitely not someone that comes up with an idea up front. I tend to be like working on something completely unrelated, and then I have a good idea to help.
Well, I didn't know if we had something in our backlog that was this generic of like
I mean,
sort
let
of
me look real quick, but I don't
in
think so.
documents. I don't think so either. And so I just wasn't sure. And I was like, and does it go here? I
Matter
think
of
it
fact,
does.
it might not be an issue. This might be a projects board because it's got a lot of pieces. Like maybe we should I should just make a new projects board, put the summary in there, and then we can note all the pieces we care about, such as IRC and Slack and mailing lists and such. And that way it's a bit more comprehensive in scope, and we can focus on individual pieces as needed for Cassandra.
Actually, so that brings up a good point. And Cassandra, do you want your own project board maybe at the SaltStack.org level? Because
That's
then
not
you
a
can,
bad idea.
that's not a bad idea at all. Maybe we should do that.
Yeah.
That would give people more visibility too. I'm happy to create one for you. I think you actually have the ability to create it yourself.
Yeah,
In
but
fact,
if you do it and
lots
it
of us
goes
do.
wrong, it's not her fault.
There's no
There we
wrong
go.
way.
Yeah,
Everything can be changed.
exactly. We're agile, right? That's what that means.
That's right. But yeah, maybe we put it there. And so then as we have things that do involve this group, they can be in this repo, but then link back to that project. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think that might make the most sense.
If that's
Okay.
the case and we want to have comments coming from this group, then I'll just make an issue then. And
That sounds great. It'll be one of your bigger ones.
yeah, okay, sounds good.
Awesome.
One thing that Cassandra to be, I guess, aware of. I don't know if it will be a big deal, but just I know that some of the SaltStack sites out there, whatever tool they're using to build it is kind of like results in some heavy pages that are hard to navigate. So wherever we put whatever we end up doing kind of under that umbrella, we should make sure that it's, accessible to people without a MacBook Pro.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that Cassandra and I've been talking about on the side is that right now I think that we don't have one source of truth that everybody can get to. I mean, we may not ever really have one source of truth, but we could do really broad communication and do some over communication and then start paring that down to link people to fewer, right?
Yes.
And maybe
I'm going to assert that we might have a single source of truth.
well, we might, but it needs some help, always.
It needs some better marketing.
That's true. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I've talked with them recently, and they seem very open to whatever's going to help tech writers effectively get stuff done and allow better communication between what marketing is trying to achieve, which help SaltStack and open Salt's image, but in the most effective way for us and the community to be able to understand and improve things. So
That's great.
yes, they probably do need some better marketing, but they're very open to that.
Who is this you're talking about?
I recently talked to Rhett, VP of Marketing.
Okay, yep.
They have their own plans and stuff going on, and I'm trying to collaborate with them to ensure that whatever they produce is both is close to what we're producing in terms of tool set, if possible, and also that we make it as easy to integrate both of their stuff and our stuff as needed. They might market here's the tutorial to get started with Salt, and then we're and also, by the way, here's the documentation page, So
Yeah. I'm
I have
doing
an
a lot of
update.
that stuff.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Cassandra.
I'm doing a lot of that stuff with marketing as well. So I meet with them a couple times a week.
With
To kind of, my role is part of the engineering team, but I also work with marketing because there's some overlap.
You are an engineer.
Yes. Apparently. The interesting thing is that, so for marketing, there's always kind of the targeted audience of these two different things. So a lot of times the marketing audience is more aimed at building business, and the community audience is aimed at our contributors and helping make the product better. And so there's a lot of discussion about where those overlaps are.
Right, and that's I guess where my main efforts is
Yeah.
to acknowledge where they are and make sure that no one has completely picked their side to trump the other, but like there's some
Same.
kind of mesh that works.
And then Rhett and I have been working together on the community.saltstack.com page to make some changes on that. It's run on a
Yes.
platform called Bevy, which is kind of like, for those who don't know, it's kind of a hybrid of like WordPress and Eventbrite or a Meetup.
Right, and I did talk with Rhett, and he did sound like he was open leaving that so that we could be more on a consistent stuff.
Yeah, we have submitted a list of kind of requirements and requests to Bevy, and then I'm not sure where we are on that. I think that list went to them last week.
Okay,
So I know some things they have to change on their end and some we can do on ours.
I'd love to hear more about that off our recorded session later.
Awesome.
If okay, yeah.
Yep.
All right.
Oh, I just
So-
wanted to add an update about the getting started tutorials because I had another follow-up meeting with marketing about that. I got them to agree to let the docs team have the final say on what format the getting started tutorials are in on the back end, since we'll probably maintain it after they are initially created. So just want to let you know that I got that concession. So
Yay!
That's awesome.
Awesome.
That's huge and that's amazing. Congrats.
Yeah, that'll also probably mean that like it won't get outdated again. It being on
Yeah.
the same tool set.
yeah, like we don't have the bandwidth to create the initial tutorials, but we can maintain it after it's created, and make adjustments as needed. So
Right. All right. Moving on then. We have all somewhat whispered and chatted about how things are going to move over to GitLab, right? And how then we'll be using this pipeline and its pages, and that's going to support the website now instead of doing whatever it is that, as Bryce had pointed out, is like a stopgap with the drone stuff. One thing that has kind of not been fully chatted out is that all of the different repositories that we've talked with Felipe about, or Felipe, I don't actually know Felipe. Okay. We've talked with him about, it's like there's several repositories, and once he knows the permissions, he'll put them into GitLab, and I think that's more or less solidified. If not, I'll message him and figure that out. But the bulk of our documentation is in the Salt repository, and obviously OpenSalt is never moving GitHub because that history is too valuable for us to go look at regression and code. But I've also experienced pushback in the past when I talked about taking any documentation that's not in line with the code and moving that to GitLab. I would like to discuss why there's that pushback, if anyone recalls.
I don't know, but my guess is whether or not it's a correct feeling, but there's a feeling that if it's open source, it's on GitHub, and that's just where people go. So if there's pushback, if you're getting pushback, I would assume that that's why, is because people typically think of, oh, GitHub is where we put open source stuff. And so if there's a question there and people are like, oh yeah, I would expect to find the documentation on GitHub alongside Salt. Now, personally, I don't really care because I'm much more into the underlying, that we have the actual documentation wherever it is, and we have it in Git. And from that perspective, we should have most everything with Capture that we need to. My thoughts are like, I don't really have a problem moving it to GitLab. As a matter of fact, GitLab has a lot of other really neat features that might make some of the documentation stuff like quite a bit better, because you can
That's my interest as well.
like doing the GitHub or GitLab pages, you can build basically whatever you want as long as it dumps out into HTML. So because I'm pretty sure with GitHub you have to just use like Jekyll or some other weird stuff, but with the GitLab pages, as long as it ends out in HTML, then your pipeline will just run on it, and it will produce a web page for you. So it's like, well, that's really easy to do. But saying that, I don't think that I think that doing like the mirror, because GitLab can mirror a GitHub repo, I don't really see a reason why not to do that. At least if people kind of expect to have documentation on GitHub, especially, because you can. I know the PRs don't work as well right now, but you know, merging PRs in two places is not super onerous especially from like a documentation perspective. Like that's not a big
so
deal.
let me make my case then, and we'll see if anyone wants to shoot back, and that's fine.
Sorry, can I just make, Alan, can I just make a quick interjection?
Go for it.
GitHub, you can actually, just a quick one. It's just about Jekyll. You're not restricted to Jekyll on GitHub. You can actually set no Jekyll, and then you know I was mentioning Antora before in one of our discussions at the beginning. I've got an Antora site running off GitHub.io, so you can do other things with it. You're not restricted. Just wanted to make that little point.
Okay, cool, good to know. Sorry, that killed my train of thought for a second. It was a good point though. All right, so my argument here is that OpenSalt repository is for the code, and we'll never remove the inline documentation. That should never change. That will be imported from GitHub to the website on GitLab's pipeline. That's fine. That's normal, and like that's a good thing. But all the documentation that has nothing to do with physical code, like it's not embedded with it in any way, in my mind, that has nothing, that should in no way ever be on OpenSalt, because that's the tech writer field. That's the, I'm teaching you guides, I'm holding your hand, I'm slapping your hand. It's not code. And it's easier for us to turn out and do pull requests if someone doesn't have to be an engineer to sign off, this doesn't affect OpenSalt. Like that's, like, it's just not needed. And as you had said, kind of the pull requests are janky on that.
Yeah,
Something to say, Derek?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that too, because this PR, for example, which is restricted just to the docs directory and the RST files within it, it's kicked off like 25 test suite items that are going through the entire project tree to kind of go.
Isn't that fun?
Yeah, does the code work as expected? Does everything? And it's things just so that it has no impact. It has zero impact on.
Right.
And for what it's worth, it costs about $20.
Yes.
Oh yeah, each time.
Yeah, and we're working on that. I think there's actually a ticket somewhere for the docs specifically to not run on everything, to like go through lint, and that's it, and just the few doc tests that it's needed, and not, you know, hit like CentOS 7 tests and stuff. And we're getting there. But yes, that's correct. And I'm sorry about that. That's where we are. So
we just
a
need
lot
all
of
the
it is
time in the
history.
world.
Right. A lot of the reason that some of the tutorials exist in the code base is because we were small, and that's what we did, and that's where we were able to put it. And so we made a static site generator, and the tech writer that we had just did it from the code base. And so we've evolved, and now we need to go back and clean up. And that's,
I could actually see a separate repo that has maybe what's in that
sure.
doc directory, and that just pulls if it's going to build the entire site, which includes the API documentation, that it could just pull what's in that repository. Yeah. And then run the Sphinx, run the make commands to build it out.
Totally.
And I mean, that's kind of nice to have that segmented out, so that changes in the docs repo don't have any, there isn't any strange, weird accidental impacts or otherwise.
Which is something that I ran into last night. So I did get Sphinx updated locally. I got it updated from the whatever we had it locked on to the latest Sphinx, which is 3.0.1. And just fun tidbit that I said in Slack, if anyone Googles Sphinx Python, it will have like 4.0.0. And so you think 4.0 is the newest Sphinx. That is not the case. It's 3.0. So it took me like an hour to realize that. But anyways, I did get it updated. The main issues, unless someone can give me more, that I found was that one of the old Sphinx plugins is slowly being phased out, and so I had to change how the import worked. It basically went from doing from Sphinx extension import doc tree to Sphinx extension other import doc tree. So like almost no change there. And then concurrent, I don't fully know why that was there. I see not test modules. I see I don't fully understand all the code in this file, but it has like mock modules, and I don't understand why mocking and modules in there. If anyone knows that, I'd love to be educated, because that strikes me as code testing, and we don't need to do code testing in documentation. Further, why I want this stuff separated. You shouldn't be using the documentation fix code stuff to leverage your testing if that is going on. So anyways, inside of that, they had something called concurrent in Python 2. You had to import that. In Python 3, it is part of Python. So that was throwing other errors. After I got both of those, Sphinx works in the new Sphinx, as far as I can tell. So that has been made. Again, talking with Felipe, make sure that we're all in agreement with the GitLab stuff. That will be done. That, in my mind, means the migration can happen after we just make sure that we can, and we'll do the migration. We'll use it on like, test.saltstack.com or something, some weird URL so that we can test, make sure the documentation renders properly, and then that's done, and we can just do the migration. And after that, on the roadmap, then I am most interested in is looking at the themes that Alyssa Rock has been producing or finding. I don't fully know everything that went there, but nonetheless, looking at it, seeing how we can leverage it, what changes need to happen both for our regular documentation and the inline code documentation. And because that will, if we can get this new theme for Sphinx to work and it renders properly on GitLab pages, that opens the door to like 90% of the issues people have been asking for improvements on. And in a way that doesn't create more technical debt for us down the road. Instead, it's being automated, or it's going to be leveraged through some system check. Thoughts? No? Okay, cool.
Or what, when you're talking about the theme updating aspects, or kind of what were you referencing that to?
He's talking about the read the docs themes that we're doing for
yeah.
the SSE installer that will hopefully maybe eventually port to OpenSalt, but not in the near future, in the far off future.
And we're actually doing, from the fresh build of the migration of the installation guide, is we're also fresh building into Sphinx 3.0.1. We're having the overriding kind of like, my idea is to have kind of like a separate, so there'd be like a read the docs theme extension brought in, but then there'd be like the Salt specific theme overrides that would be maybe setting in a separate repo, so that any updates to that theme is kind of outside of each of the repositories and can just be pulled into any of the docs.
Yeah, Mike Verhulst, who's listening in on this, had a similar suggestion last night when I was talking to him about it. So
awesome. Yeah, like and so far it's like things are looking great with 3.0.1. I mean, there were also some extensions that I noticed that they would be deprecated by the time Sphinx 4 comes out unless they make some changes. So I've already put in a PR for one extension that might be used in the future, and commented on and opened some issues in some other ones out there to get the ball rolling a little bit. And the read the docs theme doesn't bark and have any weird issues either for 3 in warnings in relation to what could happen with 4. So it's looking pretty good right now at the outset, at least.
Cool. Yeah, so as Alyssa's already said, it's not intended for it to be anytime soon. I'm hoping to gain access to your guys' read the docs and collaborate with you so I can do parallel testing on the open side at the same time. The one thing that I did want to point out from just generally the theme of read the docs is that it's pretty universal. I've seen probably a couple dozen different ways that someone's made read the docs themes. I obviously like the upgrades and updates, but I do strongly recommend that you change your guys' theme, if you haven't, to somewhat look like the one that you currently had, because SaltStack's current way of navigating is very, it's familiar. You don't look at that and say it's like every other website. And at the same time, it's not too unique to where it's strange.
Yeah, we are kind of theming it out so that, and we're working with our marketing folks to make sure, hey, is this in line with the way that the Salt look and feel across like our websites, and kind of looking at the concept of, could we have a theme color slight color difference when it comes to open docs versus enterprise, to kind of get, oh, I'm looking at the open docs right now, but it would look mostly the same other than maybe some color tweaks associated with it being open.
Okay, that's awesome. On a larger scale of what I'm hoping to do in the future, I'm just kind of voicing this now so people can take that into consideration in their decisions, is I'm hoping all documentation, whether SOC, classes, open salt, is relatively looks similar in terms of how it's structured, so that if one has been indoctrinated by one of those three mediums, they have no problem working with the other ones. Because that's one of the hardest things of onboarding, such as that beginner tutorial. I took that a few years ago, and I was extremely frustrated. It took me 2 months to get anything to work because the tutorial page that you go through and then trying to learn how to navigate the regular salt docs was just too alien for me for my brain to connect things. I'm also slightly slow, so there's that too, in the 2-month number, but nonetheless, it was not seamless and it was not indoctrinating me on how to properly navigate documentation effectively.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. It's kind of interesting because I started Salt like back at 0.14 or 15 or something. I mean, like a long time ago, and the docs have come a long ways since then.
Yeah.
But I kind of got used to this hybrid style of like navigating to the docs, and then when the docs were like just missing and didn't tell me anything useful, just looking at the code directly, because it's well written for the most part. It's typically really easy to follow, and so that was my process. And then I
got too complicated.
Well, yeah. So then I didn't touch Salt for probably a couple of years, and then I came back and the tutorial, and I was like, wow, this is really neat. But it was like completely different than the documentation, and the documentation is like, oh well, it's better now.
Yeah.
But so I very much get where you're coming from and where your challenges were when you're like, but this doesn't look the same, because they're
right. And so that's what I'm trying to do. I think one of the things that's been the criticism of Salt isn't its tool. It's like how hard it is to learn different pieces of it. And I'm trying my best to make sure that we're not hurting us who are already competent in Salt, but at the same time making it as easy as possible to onboard other people, whether they be gray beards from a 20-year-old admin role, or it's some young kid out of high school that wants to like learn this.
Yeah, and I think one of the hardest things for people coming to Salt, I know this was for me, and I don't know that I've ever met anybody who was like, oh yeah, Salt terminology, like that just fit my brain.
I still don't follow half of the terminology like I should.
Yeah, and so and I don't think it's necessarily the fault of Salt so much as the problem domain is really, it's a difficult problem domain, right? I mean, there are only 4 like really big projects that do this kind of thing, and Salt does more things better than any of the rest of them. And so
also like actually repurposes the terminology from the other ones to like how they're actually meant to be used, not just used as marketing words that don't actually do that.
Yeah, so it's really, when you talk about grains and pillars and some of these things, like there's not really any other words that you can use to describe what some of these things do. Like you can kind of say, oh, well, this is config, but it's not really just config data. It's like config data in this way. Yeah. And I don't know if there's a way to like, I don't know, pull a, what's his name? The physicist Feynman. He had this way of describing like really complicated topics, like how light is both matter and waves.
Oh, yeah.
And you could be like, whoa, yeah, that makes total sense.
I feel like that's half of my job as a consultant with Salt is like I'm just gotten good at analogies.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
my wife, who's completely not tech, right? I I'm able to tell her exactly what I'm working on in some kind of analogy, and she's like, "Okay, that makes sense. Good luck on that."
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
okay.
So we, I feel like we need a Feynman for salt.
Yeah. So
And I think that is this group because that
Yeah.
is what you guys are really good at. And like
Yeah.
Alan said, this is where you guys are going to excel. And a lot of us that don't have this superpower, because I don't actually have it, I'm here to support you.
she's like, I support what you do. Okay, so then we've talked about the themes, the migration, what issues we have not got done. Who is this person? What's his name? Oh, you're here. Kirill. I can't say his name either.
Do you say it, Carol?
Yeah, it's close.
Close,
Oh.
sorry.
Say it.
Say it for us, please.
It's Kirill.
Kirill.
So
All
nice
right.
to meet you.
He had lots of questions that he put up in or comments in Slack of like, these are the things I'd like to see improvement on. Is there any particular one you'd like to hear spoken about first?
Well, actually, not really. Just a suggestion for you guys to think about. Maybe just like I'm just a community member. But what I actually was interested in is that comment regarding the syndic, which is not going to be like documented. That sounds strange.
Right. All right. I'll explain that. This is a touchy subject, I think, because this is the broach between community, open salt driven, and SaltStack as a company. But I am a third party, so I can talk about it. So Syndic is the open source solution to allow you to take multiple masters and somehow string them together and get that to communicate on a larger network. At some point, I don't know who it was, Tom Hatch or whoever, somebody had a better idea, and that's what became the SSE product, because it was far more efficient and much easier to do upgrades and add more features, and that's what became SSE. So SaltStack as a company focuses on improving that, and I in this group are working on getting the documentation for that to OpenSalt so the community can see that solution. And so that's why I said SaltStack itself is not going to improve Syndic because they've already found a better model. It's still available to us because it's in OpenSalt and it does function. And the community does have the ability to mess with it and use it, but you shouldn't expect resource support from SaltStack because they have something better for us, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but it's not in Salt Open, right?
It is in Salt Open. It is open salt. You can install Salt and uninstall. So the main way they do it when you go to the repo page for downloading it is you will have install Salt Minion, Salt Master, Salt Key API, and one of those is Salt Syndic. And that is open salt. That is part of open salt.
No. I meant that's like a different solution. What you're talking about.
Oh no, yeah, that's correct. Yeah, that's the solution they came up with. Did become the business model that created SaltStack. SaltStack, its company, it exists because they came up with a better solution for everyone. But yes, it is monetized, which is appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Still a bit strange. I mean, the Syndic was written, implemented by Salt. And I'm not sure if it's like reasonable to expect from community to document it, because I personally can't. I can't implement HA in my personal deployment because I don't know how to implement HA.
Right. And so so I understand that both on Syndic and from SSE, both of those kind of have that problem. Specifically with SSE, I have negotiated, and everyone else here, so I don't get full credit, but we have negotiated and said that it'd be easier for people to understand there's a better solution and how to install it, use it, configure it if the documentation's available to the public. That action is being pursued. For Syndic itself, we as open source community members, we can make a pull request and make those changes to make Syndic more clear and easier to use. And I have thought about doing that, but I'm involved in a million things, so I have not put the effort into that. But yes, you could upgrade and improve that if you do come to understand how Syndic works. So I do know that specifically I learned Syndic through a combination of learning SSE from taking one of the SaltStack classes and being able to ask contrasting questions. I do remember that I was struggling with getting Syndic to work when I was on my own. So
as far as I understand, there is at least 2, maybe 3 approaches how can you configure Syndic. And like one of these approaches, which is actually was ticket what I referred to, was I believe implemented someone from LinkedIn guys, which like multiple syndics, multiple masters, and they presented like this is like the best way to do HA in Salt, and we implemented in Salt, yada yada, use it, and like hey great, where is the documentation? And there is none, and like okay.
Yeah, it sounds like as a consultant from Terminal Labs, I would say that is sounds horrible. It sounds like they combine multi-master with Syndic masters and try to make a daisy chain, and that sounds super inefficient. So I'm sorry that you were led down that route.
Probably a good way to make money as a consultant, though.
Yeah. You know, that's always the funny part is like consultants exist because there's fires, but at the same time, I'm trying to put the fires out, you know.
Yeah, all right. So just to close this topic, basically. So, okay, Syndic is like, it's one thing. I mean, you probably should maybe somehow highlight what it's kind of won't be documented by Salt.
Yes, I'm working on that. I will get that in there eventually.
Yeah,
yes.
But in the scope, like, for example, like VCHA documentation. So it's going to be some kind of how to do a proper and like to some extent HA configuration in Salt without buying Salt Enterprise.
Yeah, my intention, and like other people will probably collaborate on this, is that when SSE docs are put out there, my intention is to redo the Syndic docs and show what it can do and how to do that, and then have a comparison with the SSE docs showing like where Syndic falls short, SSE can exist. Because it is true that if you have like 6 machines and for some reason you have to have 2 masters, there's no point using SSE. Like it's just that small, like come on. But at the same time, if your 6 cluster with 2 masters grows to 30,000 for some reason, then like Syndic will just fall over because it's just not good enough and you will need SSE. So yes, I do have that on the roadmap to eventually better clarify the Syndics and then use that clarification with SSE to show which one you need and when. Is that sound satisfactory?
Yeah, it makes sense. It's still not it's not yet in the scope of how to do NHA in Salt Open. I mean, yeah, you're going to clarify this like the differences, yada yada. But is it going to be some kind of HA docs provided for Salt Open? Like how can I make an HA configuration in Salt Open? Like a how-to basically. A tutorial,
that's included. That's included in my statement. Yes, that's.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. So yeah, so there you go. Everyone can munch on that and know that's like people are still interested in that and at the same time are hungry. On some of the other comments he had, I'm going to go ahead and use those for conversation. Beginner's Guide, Alyssa has been pretty staunch on that and like wanting that to improve. And you've heard already that marketing also has an interest on getting that upgraded. If I remember correctly, the way they put it was that they're taking on that task specifically because they have the bandwidth to work on it. You know, so like people here can work on it too, but they have more room to do the work. For the migration guide, that is a really great topic. Like that is a really good idea. Also a huge undertaking. Being able to have consistent guides of migration from Ansible, Puppet, and Chef. That was, I'm not even sure like we could do that, even if we got everything else done. That might be something where we could maybe get a one-off of everyone, of like each one of those. And then like the community has to keep it up to date because every time you incorporate another product and do a comparison or migration, that's technical debt of keeping track of when they update. How do you deal with those updates? So that is like super valuable. Also a huge amount of technical debt.
Yeah, and I'm actually like migrating from Ansible to SaltStack right now, and it's a pain actually. I spent around like 3 months just to understand how can I do the same things because of like before slots and still slots is still in some early adoption state. There is no really like runtime update of configuration like conditionals and stuff. And in Ansible, it's like really easy to do, and a lot of logic is built around it. And in Salt, there is none. This wasn't known, and it was like unbelievably hard.
I might need to talk to you offline more in detail about that because I'm pretty sure that is doable, but maybe in a different architecture framework and you're used to, like a different way of approaching the
It's
subject.
doable starting from 3,000, I think. At least there is slots for conditions, like for these requisites.
Right. Okay. I mean, a lot of those requisites have existed for quite a while now, but I think I understand. Yeah. All right. So again, that is another conversation that maybe SaltStack and other people here, if you think there's any interest in that. I know that, for example, there was a huge amount of interest of how to SaltStack the Kubernetes, right? This is also another great subject. Ansible, Puppet, Chef. What about migrations from those?
Yeah. You know, to this topic, shoot, what's his name from the test working group, and SUSE gave that talk on Ansible Gate at SaltConf, and it was just like, I had never seen that, and it blew my mind because he was like, "You can use Ansible."
Can you give a 1 minute summary? Because I didn't actually see that talk.
Oh yeah, super good. I highly recommend going to find it. But basically, the 1 minute summary is Salt can control Ansible.
Yeah.
And so if you have Ansible already like built up, you can have Salt control your Ansible, and then you can start building new things out in Salt and take advantage of reactors and everything else, all within Salt, without touching a single line of your Ansible or migrating it over to Salt. And you can just leave Ansible alone if it does the things that you need it to do, and just say, okay, now we're using Salt, and you start building up your infrastructure, and you gradually migrate away from Ansible. But you know, it's not necessary to take 3 years of Ansible code and either just throw it out or completely rewrite it. You can say, well, we're just going to be, this stuff is
you're talking more like a phase system rather than going cold turkey.
Yeah.
Was that Pablo's talk in 2018?
I think.
Was it
2019?
Was it? There's one 2018 too. So
maybe he did another one then. I think it was Pablo. I think that's his name.
Yeah.
Pablo Suarez.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's him. It was definitely this last SaltConf because it's the only one I've been to.
Gotcha. I'll go look.
Same. It was a lot of fun teaching at it, though. So what else is in here? HA scale complex deployment. This is a selling point of Salt, but it's lacking documentation. That makes sense. I don't know if you could ever get that because for example, with my current client, it's very unique. That is a case-by-case basis. It's kind of like the concept of a proxy minion. Like we have proxy minions, but they are specifically built generic because what you want them to do is going to be unique to just your stuff. And that's what I had to explain to my client. They're like, why am I developing all these execution modules or all these custom modules? And the answer was because no one else is ever going to use them again. It's the same thing with HA, scale, and complexity. We're saying you can do that. We've created a generic framework in which you can implement whatever you want. But we're not going to build out the rest because people don't like it when you tell them you have to do it this way. So that's why Salt specifically leaves it generic so you can build it out in your specific image, if that makes sense. We have talked about, though, Gareth, who jumped off earlier, we have talked about at length that people do want more complex examples. I have talked with multiple tech writers here about that their SE team, who writes lots of proof of value, proof of concepts, they're creating the very examples of complex HA and complexity and scale and all that you're asking for, but that's never been put into documentation. So that's being discussed, but not softly, but it's not actually like on the table yet. So you might see something that you're looking for there eventually, but as you've already heard here from the last hour of chat, that there's quite a bit though still to be covered before that can be broached. But yeah, so understand you'll never have specifics really, because it's just way too much technical debt. You can never make one of every single combination. In terms of Salt internals, again, this one is this is like the difference between waterfall and agile methodology. the SALT specifically has been trying to, SaltSec has expressed that they're trying to speed up their release cycle, and spinning up your release cycle is what, like every, your major versions is like every year, but your minor versions was every like 3 months, 4 months, right? Sage?
For open or for
Open.
enterprise?
Just open.
For open. So it was a year, and now we're transitioning to every 4 months. And in between those 4 months, to also do point releases or bug fix releases.
Right. So for the internals of SALT, they're being adjusted a lot, all the time. If you just look at the pull requests and changes being made, to give internal documentation would be quickly outdated. I am trying to, along with this is what the point of this docs working group is to automate as much as possible so that we can remove just work hours that have to be done keeping manual labor going, and so that they could possibly be able to start documenting those things that are changing more often. But at the moment, we can't do that. It's just, it'd be useless, right? I tell you, like, this is how the lazy loader works, and then 3 months later, somebody, CR or whoever, just changes another thing, and then someone has to remember to go change that. And that's one of the problems with some of our documentation now. We have probably a couple hundred pages that are always becoming outdated from release to release, and no one remembers to go update them. So I definitely don't want to promise giving SALT internals documentation until we've proven that we can automate most of the other things. So that's the majority of it. This went on for a good long time, for a good hour. I think we're done unless someone wants to talk about something or closing comments and questions. Anybody?
So yeah, Wayne and I are both going to say the same thing. We had Megan join, and you guys that were in the open hour, we also think that this group would be good to bring into the conversation about changelog and town crier. Not something that we have to beat again in this hour, but I just wanted to bring that up. If you guys weren't in the open hour, a lot of people here were. We'll post it, go back and look at that. The changelog, I think you guys would bring a really unique perspective to that. So I would like to bring you guys into the conversation. And I think that's all we have time for. Megan, do you have anything?
Yeah, I mean, we're 5 minutes over, so I can post the links to the different types of approaches we're thinking of using so that you guys can be aware. And then, I don't know, do you want to discuss it next meeting or?
Okay, yeah, I'll do as much research and whatever you ask or whatever you give us for resources.
So yeah, we're either thinking of taking the town crier approach or setting on requiring the commit to be a certain message, and then we would create some sort of automation so the changelog is generated off of that commit message. Okay.
The only thing that's closest right now to showing internals of SALT really is if you're following the release reports. That was what I'd argue is your closest to documentation of internal SALT.
Great.
Anything else, guys?
Nope, but we are going to bring up the changelog discussion next week in the open hour as well. So.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, y'all enjoy your work day.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.